Welcome everybody, I'm John Walley, and today we're going to be digging into the release 319 for Tenable OT Security. I have been waiting on this for a long time. I know Tenable's been working on this for 6 months, and their development team has been communicating with me on releases and testing, and I can't tell you, I know I've mentioned this several times in the videos in the past, but this is a master release. As a matter of fact, there's rumor that this is going to be the last release before they go into 4.0. So let's talk about some of the challenges and some of the things that you'll need to do before moving to 319, and then we'll dig into what it offers. So one of the things that are important that you know is that this upgrade from 318 or 317 up to the 319 version is only supported on the Tenable Core Oracle Linux 8 version. So you'll have to migrate over from CentOS to your Tenable Core OL8 before you can upgrade. Very, very important. So there's a script out there to do that, and out on their documentation page for their releases, there's a link to that script. I will add this in the comments below. Make sure that you do that migration before you try to upgrade, or that upgrade is going to fail on you. The second thing is this is a major release, and I said this before. One of the things that will happen when you're going through this is this may take some time to do the upgrade. There's been some major under the hood changes as far as Tenable OT and how it works. So don't be surprised if this takes as much as several hours, and you'll even see this on the page. Now, when I went through the upgrade, it took me about 15 minutes, but if you have a lot of data, it's more than lab data, I can see this taking a long time. So let's jump into the features. So the first feature that you're going to see is they've really started to expand this vendor and protocol support. They're covering Moxa, they're covering some of the Fox TLS stuff. They have Siemens out there as well. They're always extending vendors and protocols out there. So the first thing that I want to dig into is how they're looking at visibility in general. They've really changed the way we're looking at assets, whether it be IoT or regular assets, whether they're IT assets or they're OT assets. So in general, they've really upped the game when it comes to the IoT and asset relationships. And this is one of the first things that they talk about. This ability to really see into IoT is helping, because what they've done is they've created a connector where we can go in and we can add that connector to our IoT device either through API or using an agent that's provided by whoever that is. So this is going to allow us to do things like integrating with cameras and badge access systems and fire panels. There's so much out there that we can do now because of this IoT integration. Think of all the building systems that we weren't able to access before, and now we'll be able to because of this integration that Tenable's done to really dive into IoT. I don't know if you're familiar with the 318 and previous to this, but typically IoT was things like, oh, we found a printer. So it didn't bring a lot of value. So I see this really expanding, especially when we're talking about if you're people that are working in building automation systems. Then they get into asset relationships. So instead of getting into and walking through this, I want to show you a little bit about what they're doing. So if I jump over to my tool, I can go into my actual inventory, and I'm going to go to my controllers and modules, because you're going to see more relationships in this area. If I go in and dig into one of these devices, let's say we go into this PLC, and this is the normal kind of information you're going to see. It's going to give you what the name of it is, what state, what model. It'll give you a model number. You can even see things like serial numbers and stuff like that. But if we go through and look across our backplane, you're going to see this looks a little bit different. Once you click on it, it's going to say, hey, this is a communication module detail. If we go to the next one, we'll see the same thing. But now when we get to this third one, we'll see not only do we have this, but we have nested devices that are off of this. This will even happen more when you're looking at like I/O cards, because you may have some variable speed pump that's out there, where now all of a sudden you can see what's behind that I/O card. And so it'll end up having these nested devices. And you could think of this also in scenarios, let's say you have some kind of gateway, like you have a bunch of devices on BACnet. Now we can see that. So this is a huge change in the way that we used to see assets. We can see a lot deeper now into our networks, where we're getting down to really low kind of areas in our Purdue model. So now we're not talking 2 and 3, but we're starting to get over into that level 1 almost. Not quite, but we're a lot closer than we used to be. So you're going to get this idea of we can do nested devices. You'll also be able to see this over related assets. So if we go down on the left-hand side here, we'll see what are our related assets to this, and it would give us a list of all those related assets that were out there for that device. So if I go back up to my details, I'm going to go ahead and go here so that we can look at this. I'm going to go to this COM adapter, and I'll go to related assets, and now you'll see it. So this is if we pull up this one device, we have an IO card or we have a COM adapter, and we bring that view up instead of that controller view. Now you'll see everything that's related with just that COM adapter. So this is really a neat way of seeing what's nested and how things are connected, and seeing that relationship between devices beyond just a network map. We still have the network map that we had before, where you can see all these devices, but now we can see specifically on this device and how it accesses. And so you'll see here, we'll even talk about the access direction is the nesting relationship is where we're going out to a partner. And you'll see the details on that we're doing that over control net. So you can see like now it's a much lower functioning protocol that we can see this going back and forth. All right, so these asset relationships are huge. So just if you think about this relationship with our IoT, what we can see in, we can start connecting those in and seeing low level things like fire panels, like what we said. And then we can see this nesting behind those devices as well through these relationships. This is becoming really, really powerful for us. And you'll see this down below where these asset relationships can be these OT devices, but it also relates to any of these IoT connectors. Now, the next area of this is this dynamic fingerprinting engine. And Tenable hasn't really talked about this in the past. I know a little bit about it because back a long time ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it was really hard for us to say we know what all these assets are. There were several hundred out there, but we would always find these assets that we couldn't fingerprint. Well, now we have a whole database dedicated just to fingerprinting that gets updated all the time. So what we used to have to do is have to wait on an update for vulnerabilities and plugins, or we'd have to wait for an update to come out where we were updating the actual whole version of the application. But now what Tenable's done is added a third type of update engine out there just for fingerprinting. Because what I've seen on the back end of this is that they may come up with 2, 3, 4 things as far as fingerprinting, but we have to wait until the whole next big release before we get that. So now they've added the capability not just for our plugins and for our regular updates, but now we can get this dynamic fingerprinting engine update as well. We can do this like we do other updates. So if we go into our local settings, we can go to updates, and you'll see here, not only do I have our plugins and our engine rule sets, now we also get this ability to update this dynamic fingerprinting. This is great because as they release things in the future, like what we saw at the beginning of this, where we had this new capability of fingerprinting, now these will be released in the future where we can see protocols, we know how to break them down, we can see different types of credential capabilities, and that will be pushed on a completely different schedule as they roll out. So this will be updated a lot of times on a daily or weekly basis compared to waiting on plugin updates. So the next thing we'll talk about is under the top area where we have dashboards. Now we have this capability to generate a summary report. And so if we go into this, we can say, okay, I want to go up to the very top. I'm going to go to dashboards, and you'll see this ability to do an executive report. If we click on this, it's a really clean, nice looking report. It'll give you the information on it. It'll talk about the risk at a high level. It'll talk about what our highest risks are. This is something that's been requested for a very long time, where we want to know like what are our criticalities, what devices are out there, what assets are in there, right? We want to know what assets are out there by risk score. And so we'll even be able to look at our most severe vulnerabilities. So this has been a big win for a lot of people that have been wanting to push out a report, especially if it's going to an executive team, that sort of thing. And now we finally have that capability to do that. We can also export diagnosis on anything that's going on for an asset, so we can figure out what's going on, or we can do that as a full bulk export. On top of this, there's been a lot of improvements, not just added features, but the way we're working with things. So one of the big complaints I've had for a long time is we integrate Tenable OT with Tenable Security Center. Security Center databases didn't have fields for a lot of the information that was in Tenable OT. So instead of, you would just get this kind of blanket, like you get a lot of text, but there was no real way to modify and search without doing regex and a bunch of weird stuff on the back end. So now what they've done is they've made this integration so it synchronizes a lot of information that's actually in Tenable OT that before the Security Center database didn't just have room. Like now we know the name of the device, we know what type of device it is, we know the category, the running state, the firmware version. So we can see a lot of information that used to we could only see in the Tenable OT dashboards or screens or GUI. Now we can move that up in the Security Center, and we can even do more analysis on those, including like the location will get pushed up. So we'll know what cabinet a device is in, and that's something brand new that we could not do in the past. Now this one's exciting. I've had a lot of questions in teaching classes and working with customers about active queries. And there was always a question like, well, can I run an active query on these 3 devices, but not these? Can I modify how I'm doing discovery? Like I'm fine with doing discovery on this segment of the network, but I don't want to do it on this one. I don't feel like that's safe. And there was really no way to really focus those down on saying, hey, I want to be able to touch these devices, but not these devices. You could do that a little bit by saying that I want a network segment that I want to do this, but there was no granular way to say how I wanted my active queries to work. And that's completely been redone. So if we go in and we look at our active queries, so I'm going to close out a few of these. You're going to see this looks completely different now. So I'm going to go into queries management, what used to be active queries and queries, and you'll see this looks very different. Everything's done in these small little tables now. So if I want to do OT queries, IT queries, discoveries, I want initial enrichment or running Nessus scans, I have the capability now to manage those separately and individually. So let's go to OT queries, for example. If I wanted to go do an identification query, now I can go in under actions and I can say, I want to duplicate this and I want to create multiple identification queries because I want them to have different capabilities in there. So I could duplicate it and then edit it. I could go in and say create here. And when I say create, what you'll see is I can give it a name. I can point it to a specific asset list, and I can even create a new custom asset list. So if I were to go in and say I want to create an asset list here, I would go to my groups. I would add an asset group. I could build my group here, and then when I went back to my active queries and I built this, I could drop down. I could say I only want this group and how often I want to run that individual identification query just for that group. So now we have this very granular way of handling active queries. Back in the day, we had to just turn everything on, and a lot of people didn't trust active queries. Now, in my years and years now working with Tenable OT, I've never seen it knock something over. I've never seen it do something bad, but never say never, right? So now this gives you the ability to go out and do testing ahead of time. I can say I only want to test this one device, this 5 devices, these 40 devices, this whole subnet. And I can crawl, walk, run through this process until I fully trust the tool. So this is a huge win for anybody that's rolling out active, because now I have a lot of information and of how I can break down my queries based on how I want to run those and based on the level of trust that I have. So the next big thing that we have to look at is Pendo, and I really like this tool. This is one of the best help tools I've seen out there. And we already had this in Tenable 1 and in Tenable Vulnerability Management. We've already had this Pendo tool. And with the first time I saw it, I kind of fell in love with it because it's really easy and it's only going to get better and better with time. So I don't know if you noticed, but our interface looks a little different here. Well, you'll see a little question mark up here with some notifications. This gives us the ability to ask questions right here. We don't have to go out to community anymore. It's right here in the tool. So if I wanted to go find a KB article, let's say we could do something like install Tenable OT. And what you'll see here is we'll have how to install the OT Security on Tenable Core OT Security 319, which is what we're talking about. So now I have the capability right inside my tool to look up any knowledge base articles, any articles that are written out there, or just questions across the area that can help me. If I go in, I can click on it and it'll automatically take me to how to do this. So I have it right there in the tool. I don't have to go Google it. I don't have to do any of that. It's right here. The second thing I have, which I really like, is this. Anytime there's a new feature, a new update, anything that we want to know about the tool, there's automatic training on this. So it doesn't mean that it'll take the place of in-depth, but it will give you a tour of anything that's out there. So let's say I click on this and it say, hey, we have new executive reports, which we just talked about. I'm going to get into the fixed vulnerabilities in a minute, and we have this new way of handling active queries. We have dynamic fingerprinting. We have IoT integration. We have mapping of asset relationships. So we've covered a lot of these in this video already. But let's take a look at these active queries because we just talked about this. So I'm going to say take me there. And what you'll see is it'll walk us through. So it took us down to active queries. It tells us a little bit about how they work. And I can go to next. So it will drive me through each one of these areas that come up. So if I go to new features again, let's say I want to know about executive reports. It'll take me to the executive reports and I'll be able to read about it. Now some of these will even be more guided. It'll take me step by step by step as I learn something. So I can say I got it. So you'll kind of get the idea that each one of these in here we can go in and look at. So I'm going to use this for our area of fixed vulnerabilities. So if I go into fixed vulnerabilities, you're going to see that in the past, what we used to do is just have a list of vulnerabilities, and that was it. And there was no way of reporting that, like, we've done a great job, we've cleaned this up. There was no tracking. Those vulnerabilities would just go away when we didn't see them anymore. But it was never give us any kind of trending. So one of the reasons that we needed security centers, we didn't have this trending. Well, now they've added that. So what you'll see is we can actually see our assets, how many assets are affected, and then also how many are fixed. So if I go here, I can say active vulnerabilities. This is all of our vulnerabilities. Let's say I've closed out 3 of them today. I can go in and you'll see that it says, hey, I've closed out these vulnerabilities for these assets. So now we have a way of tracking that as well. So I hope this overview has been helpful. Please ask questions in the comments. I'm always happy to answer those. I'm going to start a whole new playlist on 319 alone. So we're going to go through, we're going to configure these, we're going to walk through the setup of these and how to use these in detail. But today I just wanted to cover this overview of the major changes that we're seeing with 319. So until next time, I hope you have a great day.